I would say no.
What shape is it?
I just believe that we live on a flat plane. Yeah, like a huge flat plane. Yeah. It's only because I've traveled so much and I see like...
Did you ever get to the edge of the earth?
Nah.
Okay.
It's not that. There's more, I think that there's more masses than just what we see.
Just the earth.
Because we lived, it was one thing before and it's like spread out.
Yeah,
So it's layered like a pastry.
I wouldn't say layered like a pastry. I would just say like if this rug was the world, we would probably be like over there somewhere, and then there's just way
There's
more
others that we haven't discovered.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I think. Because when I travel, the routes that we take and how we do it, it's not possible to go up and down. You're just going straight.
I never thought about that.
Yeah.
There was a sense of practiced ease, the kind that comes from years of turning a life into a kind of running commentary, a public ledger of thoughts, fears, boasts, and all the rough materials that shape a self. In that room, laughter did its usual dance. Camaraderie opened and folded like hands at prayer. And then came the moment, the kind that does not rupture the room so much as it slowly rearranges the air within it. A man said a thing he believed, and everything changed shape. It was offered casually, the way a personal preference would be, or a travel story told without forethought. It was not built from the architecture of research or anchored in the long traditions of scientific struggle. It was simply a worldview, unbothered by the centuries that had led to our common map of the cosmos, and yet heavy too, with the loneliness of private conviction. Another man sitting across from him absorbed it with the bafflement of one who has moved through the world assuming certain agreements, certain shared realities, and finds suddenly that even the ground beneath them has its dissenters. There is a strange kind of vulnerability in watching two men confront the unseen borders of another's mind. You sense the tension not because anger is brewing, but because faith, and here I do not mean religious faith, but the quiet faith we all hold in the rules of the world, has been disturbed. The earth we walk upon is taken for granted. The curve of it, the long arch hidden by our limited vantage, is rarely the subject of intimate conversation. And yet when a person speaks from a belief that the world is flat, it draws up questions not just about the globe, but about the origin of certainty, the making of identity, the need to believe something that others have long dismissed. What moved me in that moment was not the claim itself, but the earnestness with which it was delivered. There is a kind of courage, though perhaps courage is not the perfect word, for courage implies virtue, but a kind of rawness in saying something plainly, knowing well that it has become shorthand for derision. The speaker laid out his belief not with arrogance, not with a desire to convert, but with the kind of vulnerability that comes from living much of one's life exposed. Fame can harden a person or unspool them, and here was someone who had traveled across continents, endured the strange distortions of celebrity, and came back with a story that made sense to him. One shaped by his own body in motion, his own eyes reading the distant horizon through fatigue, altitude, and repetition. He was not attempting to contest the edifice of science. He was speaking from the soft interior of his own experience. And here is where the deeper story begins, not with the disagreement, not with the look of disbelief on the host's face, but with the broader truth that every worldview is born from the contortions of a life that holds it. We assume knowledge is built in laboratories, in libraries, in institutions with names engraved in marble. And yes, some knowledge comes from those places. But belief is born in the unexplored provinces within the self. Belief is shaped by longing, fear, the desire for control, or the sense that the world is stranger, more pliable, more mysterious than the stories handed down to us. Belief often rises not where the evidence is strongest, but where the soul feels most unattended. This is not to defend any particular interpretation of the physical world, nor to elevate equal weight to every thought uttered with conviction. It is to acknowledge that a person's worldview is never just about logic or fact. It is the product of a long accumulation of hours, the way one's life has been received, misunderstood, commodified, or celebrated. In this case, a man who has traveled more than most, who has lived with the kind of visibility that fractures privacy into dust, offered a vision shaped by motion. His idea of the world was not a lesson from a textbook, but a reading of the routes he'd flown. The way his experience seemed to contradict the certainties everyone else carried without looking closely. To watch another man receive this was to witness a kind of small spiritual collision. Shock rose up, but it was the gentle shock of a person confronting the limits of their assumption of shared reality. There are unwritten agreements we believe all people hold, the earth is round, the sky blue, gravity unyielding. Yet even these can be appended in conversation. And then we are left to sit, cheeks lifted in disbelief, wondering how many other hidden continents exist inside each human mind. I am always struck by how lightly we treat belief until it reveals itself to be at odds with our own. We imagine ourselves rational, rooted in reason, built from the long march of human discovery. But that is only part of the truth. Many of us walk the world in a dream of inherited certainties, rarely interrogating the stories that made us. We trust the maps because they were printed long before we were born. We trust the globe in the classroom because its colors are familiar. We trust the blue marble floating in space because photographs, those new myths, tell us that this is home. Few question these truths not because they are weak, but because they are stable. When someone steps outside of that stability, it rattles something ancient in us. It forces us to confront the idea that our shared world may not be shared at all, that two people can stand in the same place, breathe the same air, gaze upon the same sky, and walk away with visions incompatible with each other. This discovery is not always dangerous. Sometimes it is merely disorienting. But it always reminds us that the world is held together not just by gravity and atmosphere, but by the fragile fabric of collective agreement. There's an old temptation to mock such divergence, to laugh and label and dismiss. And laughter did surface in that room, soft at first, then more sharply defined. But beneath it, I sensed a deeper unease. The host, long accustomed to the brashness of public figures, found himself for a moment unable to hold the mask of amused detachment. What stared back at him was not ignorance, but a kind of sincerity too deep to argue with. The conversation drifted, but the disbelief lingered, not because of the worldview itself, but because of the reminder that a friend, a colleague, a fellow artist can walk the earth with an entirely different map in his mind. The more I reflect on that moment, the more I think about the difficulty of holding truth in an age when everyone is broadcasting their own. There was a time, or at least a fantasy of one, when knowledge flowed downward from institutions that demanded awe. But that age has crumbled. Authority has been fractured. Expertise contends with instinct. And the individual, weary of being told what to think, often seeks solace in beliefs that feel intimate, self-earned, unmediated by systems that do not care for them. In the case of artists, musicians, poets, performers, their worldview becomes even more complex. For they live in a state of constant reflection, surrounded by people who praise them for their uniqueness, their ability to see the world differently. It is easy then to imagine that one's distinctive vision extends beyond the realm of art. When you spend your life selling perspective, you may begin to believe that all perspectives are equally shaped by personal revelation. And perhaps, in a sense, they are. But revelation is not the same as truth, though the two often masquerade as twins.